we'll go ahead and start. So,
can you tell us your name and who you are?
Yes, I'm Councilman Bob Holden, council member for the 30th District, which is just outside of this park. Starts at 74th Street, goes Queens Boulevard, north, and then on the south, Atlantic Avenue. So it's quite a large district.
So your district is right outside this park?
Slightly, yeah. Maybe the new district might include the park, I'm hoping, because they're redistricting now. And I would love to get this as my district because we had so much to do with making this a park.
Right. That makes sense. What are your memories of the gas tanks that used to be?
Well, they were a landmark, let's put it this way. Every morning, we all would hear the traffic reports, and they'd always indicate by the Elmhurst Gas Tank there's a congestion, and so that's how we kind of gauged, where we live. And then when I would remember as a kid going up on the Empire, going up the Empire State Building, and it's really kind of, you would see the gas tanks from the Empire State Building. That's how we knew where we lived.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like we could point it out and say, oh, so now we get a landmark. So the gas tanks became landmarks, although they, obviously weren't that pretty. They would paint them from time to time, but they painted them with lead paint, for so long. And so, as a result, when they took them down, starting in, I guess it was 1995, they found a lot of lead contaminated soil here. And even the railroad tracks had some contamination.
And then that has to be cleaned up.
They did, yeah. They said they had to do it. That might be the trans now.
Oh wow! I didn't even know that. The park does a pretty good job of hiding that.
Right.
Pretty
well,
cool.
That's what we wanted. When they were designing this, we wanted to put a lot of trees so you block out the noise and then the visual
That makes sense.
pollution too.
Well, what was going to happen to this site before you guys stepped in and made it a park?
Well, we got wind of it. Keystone said they were going to sell the property, and this is early 2003, and they wanted to make it. They had plans on a lot of different scenarios. One would be a strip mall. Another one would be a big box store like a Home Depot. Another proposal was to put housing here, and they would make. They had a number of streets designed, and to make it a housing complex, smaller 3-story buildings. So it's like there was three designs that we heard. Keystone made a presentation to the Juniper Park Civic, which I was president of at the time, and we kept saying we don't want any of those plans. We want a park.
How come? Why park as opposed to?
Well, this area here doesn't have that many options for park. You'd have to go to Juniper. You'd have to go miles and miles away. And the goal at that time was to make parks within access of a 10-minute walk, and this area didn't have that. So this was area of Elmhurst was starved for parks, and so we said those three options don't interest us. A Home Depot, or big box store, or strip mall, or housing. We really didn't want that. So we said we want a park, and they kept saying, and even some elected officials said, park's not an option. You're not going to get a park. Keystone's going to sell it because they owe it to their stakeholders. And I said, we're their stakeholders. We put up with the park for such a long time. I mean, the gas tanks for such a long time that, and had to put up with the contamination of the soil, with lead paint, the noise, because they would go up and down, they would make a noise. You would hear it. And I grew up literally down the street, 3 blocks away as a kid. And we said, we want a park. We need a park. They said, absolutely not.
And what exactly was your role in making that happen? I know you had a big role, but what exactly?
Yeah, well, we found out about the plan. What we fought for in early 2003, with all the elected officials in the area that came, we said we want a park, and Keystone said, all right, we'll give you until December 31st, 2003 for your elected officials to come up with the funding to buy it from them. They wanted to sell this property, and then we can make it a park. So the elected officials said, all right, well, we don't know if we can do that. The money's tight, and we don't know if we can do that, but we're going to try. As a result, months and months went by, nothing happened. In the June of 2003, supposedly, and this was told to me by Joe Matone, who was a developer that wanted to make this into a Home Depot, a strip mall, a bank. He said that he was going to make a deal with Keystone. And he went to the elected officials. Joe Crowley was the congressman then, and then also Surf Maltese, who was a state senator. And Matone went to him and said, can we get this done earlier rather than waiting till December 31st? And they said, the elected official said, well, you got to talk to Bob Holden from the Civic Association because they're making a big thing. They want a park, but you'll have to convince them. We are still now today. Juniper Park Civic is very big, one of the largest civics, and was very forceful in the area. So we wanted to protect. We all live here. We wanted to make it a park. The elected officials essentially told Joe Matone that you have to talk to Bob Holden, head of the Civic, get his approval. So the whole summer went by, and in September I get a call from Vicki Schneps, the editor of a number of newspapers in Queens, the publisher. She said, I'd like you to come into my office and meet someone. She didn't tell me who. I got to her office, I guess it was at Bayside, and she said, I got Joe Matone, a developer. He wants to make this into, he wants to give you a proposal. So Joe Matone said to me, I'd like to make this, he had plans to make it a Home Depot, a strip mall. And he showed me plans, and I said, no.
Okay.
And he said, well, you don't do it, we're going to do it anyway. You don't approve, we're going to do it anyway. And essentially he said, I'll crush you. I said, crush me? How are you going to crush me? So I played along with him for the rest of the conversation because I was ready to walk out. And then he said, I said, can you give me the plans? Can you let me see them? So he gave me some plans. Actually called it the Home Depot Express, which doesn't exist, but he tried to sell it because I told him, we don't want a big box store here. It's too much traffic.
Right.
So I played along, went home that night, got on my computer, did a press release, and I said, Keyspan reneged on their deal. They were supposed to wait until December 31st. Joe Matone told me in December he'd signed a contract to make this into a Home Depot and a development. So we started then, got it in the newspapers, got it in the Daily News, an article, did a number of things. To make a long story short, we protested. And actually, I'm a graphic designer, so we made banners with the Keyspan logo, except we called them Keyscam. And I made the banners, and a bunch of us got involved. I got Tony Nunziato, we formed a task force. He was from the Maspeth area. And so Middle Village and Maspeth got together, started protesting, started writing letters, getting elected officials on our side, and did what we could to start the battle. This was in September, early September. And then eventually did a number of things. Protests, like I said, got former Councilman Tom Ogdebeni on our side to write letters, wrote to Mayor Bloomberg. So the whole thing was in motion.
You did a lot, and you use your graphic design skills to kind of get the
and then somehow some banners got hung over the LIE on the overpasses. Keyscan. I don't know who did it, but somebody did it.
Well, why was it important to you personally to bring a park here? On a personal?
Well, I live down the street still.
Right.
So at the time, we have the LIE causing pollution every day. We had obviously the gas tanks polluting the ground with for 100 years with lead paint, and then obviously noise. So when you have a busy expressway, the busiest in the world, I think, right in your backyard, you have to counterbalance that. And so what better than a park with a lot of trees to fight some of that pollution off? And of course the noise that we have, we're under a landing pattern to LaGuardia Airport here. We also have a takeoff area at some port, sometimes. But this is called the LIE approach, they call it, where the pilots follow the LIE, which is just on the other side of that hill. So they actually, they use the visual to come. So we have planes above us polluting the air, noise, and jet fuel. And then we have the LIE. And then, so we needed a park. Now we said nothing less, but we were discouraged by our elected officials. Assemblywoman Marge Markey essentially said, Keystone is not going to, we can't come up with the money, and they're not going to give it to you.
So how did the money situation eventually get solved?
The money we didn't have to use money,
okay,
because we got Keystone to eventually donate it to the city of New York for $1. I think they wanted at the time 11 or 12 million. But we found out later the reason why they were willing to give it, because they were eventually selling the company to National Grid, to make it National Grid. And there were a lot of those leaders of Keystone were in for golden parachutes, where they were going to get a lot of money. So all this negative publicity, folks, helped persuade a lot of the leadership at Keystone. And I still have trouble calling them Keystone because I was so used to calling them Keyscam. And they didn't like that. And a lot of articles in the paper came out, in newspapers came out, including the dailies. And you'll see them in the New York Times, there were Daily News, the New York Post, a lot of articles came out. And many of them were kind to us because we were fighting a grassroots effort.
As a person who really appreciates parks, with my journey of visiting all the parks in New York City, I appreciate moves like that because it is very important to have those in the community.
We essentially got the word back in, I think it was November of that year, from Mayor Bloomberg. He came to a meeting and then announced it that we were going to get a park. And so we celebrated in November and December of that year as a victory. It's still my greatest, I think, the greatest accomplishments of the community, and personally for me in leading the fight, being one of the leaders, but certainly, if I didn't go home that night after I met with Joe Matone and wrote a press release and just accepted. By the way, Joe Matone had offered, this is kind of interesting. He wanted to give my the Civic Association, that little corner where the flagpole is and the Vietnam vets, the Vietnam Veteran Memorial. He wanted to give that 1 acre, almost 1 acre of land to the Juniper Park Civic to do anything they wanted, build a civic center, And I said, no, we don't want that. By the way, he said that was the most polluted area. He said, I just want to let you know, you'll have to do the lead abatement. And of course, we weren't interested in any of that. Never. We wanted the park. You have to stay with what you want, what your goals are. And again, the elected officials were really no help. Unfortunately, I'll just tell you that. They all gave up. The people that didn't give up were the community. The task force that we formed, the Juniper Park Civic, and us. Because we kept battling every day. It became like a mission. And there was no greater feeling when we finally, Dan Doctoroff came here and announced, along with Mayor Bloomberg at one point, that we got a park, that the Keystone had agreed, and their leadership, the COO, Patel, had agreed to give it to the city for $1. Subsequent to that, the city paid to make a park, like you see. And that hill is there because so many of us, including myself as a kid, would sleigh ride down the hill that's on the LIE. But we can't do it now. They shortened it. When they widened the expressway, the hill became, a planting area for trees, and so nobody could use it as it was a very popular sleigh riding area. And it was very dangerous because we would sleigh ride, and then eventually going to 57th Avenue, the street, which was very busy even then. So you're taking your life in your hands. But we said it'd be nice to have a hill where they could sleigh ride. It would bring back memories when I was a kid, and they did it. And there it is. And kids sleigh ride.
So you mentioned the memorial. Did you guys have something to do with the memorial?
Well, again, Tony Nunziato, who was certainly my right-hand man and certainly helped with the leadership of the Civic. He's now the president of the Juniper Civic. But he, I went to him. I needed help, and he was a very creative force in protesting. He's like, we were partners in this. And his brother was killed in the Vietnam War at the age of 21, I believe, right near his birthday. He went out on a dangerous mission. He volunteered. So Neil Nunziato was kind of an inspiration for him to help try to get, along with a number of other people, Vietnam vets, and so many other people, to get this apart and get the Vietnam Vets Memorial there, placed there. So that came much later, though, when the park was already built.
You fought for this 20 years ago, you guys. How does it make you feel to come here today? Even you just talked about the imprint you guys had on putting that hill there. How do you feel coming to this park today?
I consider this like that I made a difference on this planet. I could be councilman, I could have major accomplishments as a council member, but I always consider this, because we knew this was like, it was a lost cause, essentially. When somebody tells you they signed a contract, and so, when you hear a contract, then you say, everybody tells you, well, you're not going to get it, because they signed the contract, but they renege, because they had an agreement with us and with the elected officials to wait until December 31st of 2003, and they did. Keystone was looking at dollar signs. They were looking to sell the company. They wanted to get the money. They didn't care about what happened to the property. But eventually they did the right thing with a little urging. But to this day, you ask me how I feel, I can't describe it. Because if I didn't go home that night, like I said, and write that press release and put out, and in those days, by the way, the Daily News actually covered local, they had actually a Queens page. So they would cover, they were always looking for articles on local issues. And so I had a good connection with Don Bertrand, who was a reporter at that time with the Daily News, great guy, and a lot of other newspapers. But the Daily News always had a Queens section that we always would go to first. And that's how this happened. We got a lot of publicity. You can't win a major battle without publicity, because that gets more people involved. And then we had our magazine too. We had a Juniper Berry magazine that I was at that time, the designer of, and did it. So we dedicated a lot to that, and we put out 5,000 of those, or 10,000. So we had the resources to fight, and we knew how to fight, because we had other battles before. So we knew that by giving bad publicity to a big utility, it wasn't going to, they're not going to like that. We did. So when I came into this, the first time when I saw her, it was empty. It was actually an empty field when they started taking down the gas tanks, and I think it was 95 or 96. And it took them a number of years. By 99, I think they had them both down. It was just an open field. So we had, again, it was like, over the years, we had time to try to think what we wanted, and we always came back to a park. But seeing this, I can't pass this park without a big smile on my face, because I know what this would have been had we not all really fought hard on that.
Puts a smile on my face. But how do you feel the community has responded?
Oh, you can see. You can see.
Yes.
I mean, it's just seeing. I mean, I have to come in here because in the morning I come in here and I walk with my wife many days, because if I go to Juniper Valley Park, I can't get my heart rate up because somebody's going to stop me and recognize me. Here I have a little bit more privacy. It's a little out of my district, and I'm not as well known maybe over here, so I rarely get stopped here. because I want to keep my heart rate up, but I walk around. So
Wouldn't you lose that if it became a part of your district?
I might lose that, but it's a minor thing. I mean, it's like it comes with the territory. I just have to maybe get a treadmill. But you got to work your. I know my doctor said you got to work, walk 20 minutes fast to get the benefit. So I do try to do a half hour, 45 minutes.
Do you have a favorite part to this park? A favorite part?
I would say that there's two parts. We're the only, in Queens, the only Vietnam memorial, and that's a good distinction. I was of course about to be drafted in the Vietnam War because I was just about to get out of college, and then they canceled the draft, and I didn't have to serve in Vietnam, but I was on the lottery. I think I was number 72. I was going to go as soon as I graduated college. The only thing that kept me out was I was in college. But the second favorite part, again, is the hill. It's a beautiful, it's got everything here. It's got a beautiful playground for the kids, nice sprinklers, spaceship for a restroom. We had a little controversy with that because it was so expensive, but unique design.
It paid off.
It was, I don't know if they were trying to, the architect was trying to get the feel of the gas tanks. I don't know what that design, but it's a very unique, so it's kind of neat. It's just a beautiful park.
Do you actually like the design of the gas? Not the gas tank.
I think it's better than some of the boxy things. So
okay.
It's it was a little too expensive for me because I think we could have used it for other things here, but that's the way it crumbles out. I can't complain about. It's funny. Once we got the park, it wasn't that critical. The fight, we were so exhausted from fighting that we didn't want to fight for a certain design. We wanted to make it look like people would have fun. So we'd have a tree area where people can get some shade. We'd have, again, play areas for the kids, a hill, and that little soccer area, because I said, we don't want grass to be worn out, so maybe kids can kick the ball around. They didn't we wanted really this to be a kind of passive park. We didn't really want athletics here.
Right.
Because we have a lot of that in neighboring parks. We have Juniper that has so many baseball fields. They have 7 grass fields, some asphalt fields, and hockey rink. That's a sports park. This one we wanted to be kind of a passive park. That's what we got.
Is there anything that you would have liked to have gotten to in this park that you guys didn't get?
No, it's really, I think the Parks Department did an outstanding job. And like I said, I didn't really put an emphasis. Most of us were so thankful.
Right.
Because it was such a, we always said, instead of, I don't like the Elmhurst Park name. Because I said it should have been Community Park. We all said, it's the only thing we tried to do is try to get it to have a certain name to it, like the community struggled to get it. We wanted the story told because, future generations will not know, and I'm thankful for you, certainly, for doing this, because it's always good it inspires other groups to fight for parks or fight for what they believe in.
Yeah.
This was a good example of the community not taking, settling for a Home Depot.
Right.
Or, not that I don't dislike Home Depot, it's just like a big box store. I think the last thing we needed. We have Home Depots right all over, right? But we wanted really a park. And it's amazing, we never listened to our elected officials. Now I'm an elected official.
Yes, sir. On my journey, I see similar stories where people kind of push for the parks, and not push for it only, but I know of a story up in the Bronx of a lady who it was an old gas station, and she just turned it into a garden. And they turned it down to put something. She just kept turning it into a garden, and now it's a garden. So I love hearing those stories about the community, the people stepping up and giving the community what it needs. Why do you feel that playgrounds and parks are important to New York City?
Oh, because we live in a concrete jungle here, obviously. It's like concrete everywhere. That's why we have so many problems with flooding here, because a lot of our storm runoff goes into the Newtown Creek and further pollutes the Newtown Creek. So the water from this area runs into the Newtown Creek, and that's a shame. And it shouldn't be. That's why they're building all these rain gardens now. So we need green space.
Right.
So if this was think of it, this was all parking lots and a big box store, you'd have a lot more problems with flooding. And so this was great that we have a lot of grass here. People need that.
Yep.
We're not meant to be living totally in a, like I said, concrete spaces. And unfortunately, that's what people do to their property. They concrete everything. So we try to tell people we need more green space. I was responsible as civic leader. A big part of my agenda was planting trees. So we planted, a few thousand trees in the area. We made a deal with parks. Paul Kersner from Ridgewood did the same for years. Almost 40, 50 years he's done that. And it made Ridgewood a nicer place. When you have trees, it cools the area. So if people live, a few blocks away here, and their neighborhood is hot because the trees aren't mature, they can come in here and sit under a tree, get cooled off without sitting in air conditioning, and breathe the fresh air. We need vitamin D, obviously, so that's what the sun gives us. It helps build our immune system. So for our health, we need the sun, and we need to be outdoors. So a lot of the kids today sit in, as we all know, they sit inside, they play with their video games, or they're watching TV. So it's so important to go outside, skateboard or do whatever they, that's what this area might want. We might want to get a skateboard park here, an area, a little spot for the kids to skateboard, but they can kick the ball around. They can do a lot of good things. So it's important.
Do you have any additional things you'd like to say about this park?
I lived here in this neighborhood for 70 years now. I lived I was born down the street on 74th Street, 58th Road. I now live a block away from that. So my mother was born in 1924 in that house. So the Colas and the Holdens never left the area. And we still have family here. I'm the only sibling out of, my mom and dad had 4 kids. I was one of 4 kids. The only one that stayed here. And fought for the neighborhood. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that I stayed, because my mom, who just passed this year at the age of 97, close to 97, 96 exactly, she was so influential in my life, telling me about the history of the neighborhood, how her father built 3 homes. He was an immigrant from Italy, and he built 3 homes, and all his children, when they grew up and had families, lived in those apartments. So it was very important. And my grandfather had a small flower farm here along with my uncle. So it was very, I was very fortunate to have a good upbringing and connected to history. And so it meant the history of this neighborhood means so much, and still does. And I think that's what makes me a better elected official too, because I grew up here. And I want to defend this neighborhood and do the best for it while I'm in office. And that's important. And preserve the history. So this will always be, to me, the best place. And I always love that. Anytime I'm invited to come here, like you guys invited me here, I was glad to do it because of what this place means to me, personally.
Thank you.
Thank you.